Welcome back to Bad Things in History, where we bring you the story of a medical treatment that's a real recipe for disaster. People will try all sorts of things to improve their health. This includes avoiding foods for as long as possible. Sometimes fasting can improve health, but it can also kill. Today we are going to tell you the story of a woman who used fasting to treat disease, and most of her patients died. The history of fasting. The idea of avoiding food first appeared as part of religious practices. Nobody is sure when it started, but religious rituals often required that the people involved were as pure as possible. Not eating was one way to achieve purity. Some religious traditions also saw fasting as a way to be more open to divine influence. Jewish and Christian churches developed fasting traditions for this reason. The Eastern Orthodox Church, the Church of Latter-day Saints, and Muslim churches all require practitioners of the faith to avoid food on certain days. For much of human history, avoiding food was simply a ritual that ensured a person was ready to interact with supernatural forces. In some cases, people starved themselves as a form of political protest. But in the 19th century, new ideas about fasting would appear. Starting in 1880, a series of experiments were performed on obese people. Overweight subjects refrained from eating, in some cases for as long as 40 days. They lost weight and also didn't seem to suffer ill health effects. It didn't take long for some medical professionals to decide that fasting might be a miracle cure. Edward H. Dewey was born in Wayland, Pennsylvania on May 21, 1837. In 1864, he graduated from the University of Michigan with a medical degree. Over the next several years, he developed his own ideas about fasting. Edward decided that most diseases were caused by overeating. He said that if people wanted better health, they should skip breakfast and only eat 2 meals a day. Edward Dewey published several popular books that explored his ideas. Medical professionals did not accept them as truth, but many practitioners of alternative medicine did. One of Edward's followers would use fasting to treat her patients, and many of them would not survive. The Art of Eating. Linda Burfield was born in Carver, Minnesota on December 18, 1867. She was the oldest child in the family. Her parents would have a total of 7 children. Linda's father was named Montgomery. He served in the Minnesota Infantry during the Civil War. After returning to civilian life, he began managing a log mill, and he also didn't like the idea of eating meat. During a time when almost everyone ate animal flesh, Linda's family was firmly vegetarian. In 1931, an article about Linda gave the following description of what she was like in her youth. She was a strange child, and her parents were told she would do weird things and lead an unusual life. From the first, it was evident she was different from other children. She was inclined to be haughty, high-strung, and visionary. Linda spent many hours communing with herself instead of joining with the others in their childish activities. Montgomery was undoubtedly part of why she was perceived as being so odd. Although none of his children were ill, he decided they needed to see a real doctor. A doctor appeared and diagnosed all of Montgomery's children with intestinal parasites. The cure was a blue pill that the doctor sold. Linda and her siblings took it for years. The medication caused frequent vomiting and diarrhea. Because of the drug, Linda had problems eating and couldn't keep food down. As a result, she was very thin. Due to the frequent vomiting, she also lost her front teeth. Despite being thin and frail, Linda married her first husband after turning 18. The couple had 2 children. But Linda soon lost interest in them. She felt that she was destined for something greater than raising babies. In 1898, Linda read a book by Edward Dewey called The Gospel of Health. She believed his claims that fasting could cure everything, and she wanted to practice this form of alternative medicine. She left her husband and children and moved to Minneapolis. Linda planned to open her own practice and use fasting to cure disease. Fasting specialist. After arriving in the city of Minneapolis, Linda opened a new clinic. She wasn't licensed to practice medicine. Still, she offered a unique set of therapies for treating illness. The first thing patients had to do was stop eating. In addition to a lack of nutrition, Linda also liked to give enemas. But that wasn't all. She required her patients to accept vigorous massages that resembled beatings. Scalding hot baths were also a popular therapy. Additionally, sick patients were forced to go on vigorous walks. Amazingly, some of the patients who joined Linda's program got better and went on with their lives, but many of those who sought treatment didn't survive the process. In 1902, a 41-year-old woman named Gertrude Young had a stroke. She saw several doctors, but they couldn't help, so she went to Linda's clinic. Gertrude started the fasting diet, but after 3 weeks, she became ill and started vomiting. Gertrude's friends and family tried to convince her to eat something, but Gertrude said she couldn't stop fasting until 40 days had passed. On the 39th day, she died. A coroner's inquest ruled that Gertrude had starved to death. Linda said the death was due to paralysis and fasting had actually helped. Charges were never brought against Linda, and in the meantime, she met and married the love of her life, Samuel Hazzard. He neglected to divorce his previous wife before marrying Linda, so in 1904 he went to prison for bigamy. As Samuel languished in a prison cell, Linda Hazzard continued treating patients. When more patients died, their friends and family tried to collect the valuables. But for some reason, after a patient died, Linda had a habit of losing their valuables. In 1907, Samuel was released from prison, and authorities were starting to look more closely at Linda's treatments, so she decided it was time to move to another state. If Minneapolis didn't want her to save lives, perhaps other parts of the country would be more welcoming. Welcome Home Sanitarium. Linda Hazzard wasn't licensed to practice medicine, but the state of Washington had a legal loophole that would allow her to bypass this problem. Under state law, she could practice alternative medicine freely. Linda wrote a book the same year that she arrived in her new home. She explained that food was the cause of all diseases. Appetite is craving, hunger is desire. Craving is never satisfied, but desire is relieved when want is supplied. She also began construction on a new building to treat her patients. It was located in Olalla. But before construction was finished, new patients would arrive. A Norwegian woman showed up begging Linda for help. Stomach cancer was ravaging her body and doctors couldn't help. Linda put her on a starvation diet and the patient died. Officially, the cause of death was listed as stomach cancer. But Linda couldn't dismiss every death that occurred under her care. Claire and Dorothea Williamson were sisters who became orphans at a young age. They inherited a lot of money and they also developed a problem. The sisters were hypochondriacs and believed they were very ill. When doctors refused to help, they sought assistance from alternative medicine. The sisters read Linda's book called Fasting for the Cure of Disease. They soon believed that she was the only person that could help. In February 1911, they moved into an apartment in Seattle and began receiving treatment. Linda used every option at her disposal to treat the sisters. They were given water twice daily that was flavored with tomato or asparagus. About once a week, the sisters received a sip of orange juice, and they were given hours-long enemas every day. Special covers had to be installed on the bathtubs to catch the sisters when they fainted from the treatments. When the sanitarium officially opened, the sisters weighed only 70 pounds apiece. They had to be carried to the new building because they were too weak to walk. Somehow, Claire was able to send a message. When Claire and Dorothea were young, a nanny named Margaret Conway helped care for them. Claire sent a telegram to her, and Margaret came to the sanitarium as soon as possible. When Margaret arrived and asked about the girls, Samuel Hazzard answered her questions. He told Margaret that Claire had died and Dorothea was completely insane. Margaret went to the morgue to see Claire's body, but the corpse didn't look anything like the girl she knew. Linda was also unwilling to share the results of an autopsy. She insisted Claire wasn't dead due to not eating for 80 days. Instead, drugs given during childhood finally killed her. Margaret visited Dorothea and was shocked by how emaciated she was, but the frail girl wouldn't leave because she believed in Linda Hazzard's treatment plan. Margaret knew she couldn't do anything on her own, so she sent a message to Dora's uncle who lived in Portland. It was discovered that Linda Hazzard had made herself executor of the sisters' estate. She had access to all of their inheritance and had no problem spending it. Dorothea's uncle finally convinced Linda to accept a payment of several $1,000s in exchange for letting his niece go free, but he wouldn't let the story end there. Starvation Heights. It would turn out that Linda made a mistake by treating Claire and Dorothea. The sisters were British citizens. When their uncle revealed what had happened, the British government took a great interest in Linda's medical practice. This put pressure on local authorities to find out what was happening. Investigators looked into Linda's facility and learned that at least 9 patients had died there. The locals even called the sanitarium Starvation Heights because of how emaciated the patients were. Linda Hazzard was arrested for Claire's death on August 15, 1911. She was put on trial and the jury found her guilty. Linda was sentenced to 20 years in prison, but she would not languish in confinement for long. Letters and petitions arrived from all over the world asking for her release. Governor Ernest Lister finally agreed to pardon Linda if she agreed to leave the United States forever. Linda agreed and left for New Zealand. She spent the next several years treating patients in her new home, and Linda was very successful in making a considerable profit. In 1920, she returned to Olalla and began working at her sanitarium again. Since Linda wasn't allowed to practice medicine, she called her patients students. As her students starved to death, officials fined Linda for practicing medicine without a license, but it didn't stop her from continuing to treat patients. In 1935, the sanitarium caught on fire and burned to the ground. 3 years later, Linda became ill and tried fasting to cure herself. On June 24th, at 70 years old, Linda Hazzard died. She was the final victim of her fasting treatment. Was Linda Hazzard just trying to help her patients? Or was she a fraud who faked medical treatments to steal? And what do you think about fasting as a cure? Tell us all about it in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video. Subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Thank you for watching Bad Things in History.